The title of the talk this evening is Loving the Questions Themselves. And it's sort of a part two of the talk I offered last week. The title last week was Over the River and Into the Trees. Really commenting on how often our, especially around the holidays, but how often our experience doesn't quite match the theory, or the wish, and that how often that leads us to think that there's something wrong someplace. So I thought it might be helpful to talk a little further about the questions themselves and what to do. I spoke last week about really appreciating the confusion or the stuck places, and thought maybe we'd see if we could kind of work a little bit with the stuck places. It's like, okay, now what do you do with these stuck places? And the title, somebody recognized the title, comes from a quote from Rilke, the poet. He says, "You are so young, so before all beginning, and I want to beg you as much as I can to be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and to try to love the questions themselves like locked rooms and like books that are written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given to you because you would not be able to live them. The point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. Take whatever comes with great trust. Hate nothing." Wow. Hate nothing. So last week we talked a bit about being caught in suffering, being caught in the difficulty, and that it's a good place to be when we wake up and notice that we're caught, because we're no longer unconscious. We're no longer just kind of completely in the sort of reactive state of just this and this and this and this, and doing and just really not even understanding that what we're trying to do, we're like rats in a maze or something, that what we're trying to do just isn't going to work, and we keep trying so hard to make it work. So when we wake up and we see that we're caught in suffering, and Rilke's quote points us in that direction, as does the Buddha, it's actually good news. When we see that we're caught, it's very good news. It means there's a chance, if you will, that we can inquire and really see what is this? What is this? And where's the freedom? Remember, the Buddha's teaching is about understanding suffering, understanding the cause of suffering, understanding the release from suffering. So when we see ourselves suffering, now we have the opportunity to begin to be scientists, to begin to investigate, to begin to look and see what's causing this suffering. What is happening here? So loving the questions themselves. I thought I'd talk a little bit about how we get caught, just a little bit, and that our brain, and you know this. There's so much these days about neuroscience and how the brain works. That our brain actually, from the very first moments of our lives, starts to organize theories about things, or opinions about things, or labels. We talked last week about the labels that we have, the perceptions, and then all the stories that we have. And so our brain responds to new stimuli by basically saying, I know what this is because I can compare it to this other thing that I had before, and so therefore it's like this. It's just so interesting. I was down at the ocean for quite some time in the fall, And every morning we would sit and watch the sunrise. And so there's this word, sunrise. And I got into taking pictures of the sunrise because it was so beautiful that every single day it was a totally different experience. And indeed, every moment of every single day was a totally different experience. So moment after moment after. But there's this word, you say sunrise. And so, oh, okay, fine, I know what a sunrise is. Yeah, sun comes up, okay, fine. And that we really respond to most of our life in that kind of automatic, programmed, really mostly unconscious way. This is what Rick Hansen says in the book The Buddhist Brain. He says, everything changes. That's the universal nature of outer reality and inner experience. Therefore, there's no end to disturbed equilibria as long as you live. Oh, goodness. But to help you survive, your brain keeps trying to stop the river, struggling to hold dynamic systems in place, to find fixed patterns in this variable world, and to construct permanent plans for changing conditions. Consequently, your brain is forever chasing after the moment that has just passed, trying to understand and control it. So whenever we make contact with something, the brain is, trying to kind of understand it and control it. Brain doesn't like to be confused. So much of this effort to control is managed, well, some of the effort is managed by basically the same mechanism that causes lizards to kind of, run away or seek for food or eat bugs, And we can kind of notice ourselves when we get caught in that kind of reactive pattern, whether we're even just something as simple as being in a long line at the grocery store or caught in traffic. There was something on the news last night where there was in Chicago. Did you see that? There was a TSA line that was a mile long and extended into the parking lot. So oh, there's this, and then the brain just has all sorts of opinions about this and what this is. It has obvious survival value that the brain does that. We don't have to kind of reinvent the wheel every single moment of experience, but it actually causes some problems as we begin to collapse our experience into these categories and into these words or ideas. The point here is that much of what our brain does is just completely constructed out of our experience, perhaps out of our parents' experience, perhaps out of our culture's experience. And so we kind of invent these, if you will, storylines for our lives, and then we live within them as though they were true. We invent a notion of what a sunset is, and then we don't even look, or a sunrise. We don't even look to see what's the experience of this, or a tree, or a mother, or traffic. I mean, any of those words, we kind of have a notion, and then we live within the notion rather than the direct experience. While undergoing a medical procedure, I witnessed a nurse prompting two physicians to engage in a practiced pause before proceeding. The nurse's reminder to pause was enthusiastically welcomed by the doctors. The pause was implemented to support health professionals and bringing awareness to and inhibiting automatic pilot behaviors that could cause harm to patients. A man named Chris Molnar wrote that. What springs to mind when I say nurse? Or doctors? Or if you think about, teenagers in front of the 7-Eleven, or old people at a movie. You see how our brain just sort of has these, and so we no longer look at the individuals. That we kind of collapse the information just rather relentlessly. And so we're no longer actually really present with what's actually going on. And again, some of this is, of course, efficient. But if we don't know that we're doing it, we can just become completely lost, terrorist, or Democrat, or Republican, or individual people who show up on TV, that we form, Mitch McConnell, we form these kinds of concepts about people, and then that's just how it is. Last week I was picking on poor Uncle Otto, but indeed, those people in our families where we kind of form these concepts and then we live and relate to them from within the concepts. All that is constructed, all it's basically made up in our brains. It's what we all do, it's normal human behavior. And the Buddha said, okay, all well and good if it's useful. But if we find ourselves caught in suffering, maybe we should take a look at that. Rather than trying to get Uncle Otto to be different, or for that matter, Mitch McConnell or whoever, to be different, maybe we should start to look at what our brains are doing, what our minds are doing, to kind of, try to kind of keep them in some kind of particular category. Maybe there's some freedom that's available to us by just working with what's going on in our minds. Here's Rick Hansen again. He talks about this process. He says, some of these operations, these mental operations, are conspicuous. Much of the time, however, they operate in the background of your awareness, firing and wiring quietly along. They do this by using your brain's extraordinary capacity to represent both inner experience and the outer world. For example, there are blind spots in your left and right visual fields that don't look like holes out there in the world. Rather, your brain fills them in, much like photo software, shades in the red eyes of people looking toward a flash. In fact, much of what you see out there is actually manufactured in here by your brain, painted in like computer-generated graphics in a movie. Only a small fraction of the inputs to the occipital lobe, the interpretive part of the brain that comes from vision, comes directly from the external world. The rest comes from internal memory stores and perceptual processing modules. Your brain simulates the world. Each of us lives in a virtual reality that's close enough to the real thing that we don't bump into the furniture. And so to begin to know and remember that we're living in, each of us living in a virtual world. It's made up in our minds. So the mind leaps to conclusions and in the process is no longer able to be mindful of this moment's experience. It moves into action and reaction that is ignorant of the reality of the situation and sometimes harmful to self and to other. So when something unfamiliar happens, we try to fit it into the familiar. Or when something difficult happens, we try to fit it into the familiar. The Buddha saw this in his own experience. The Buddha left home and he wandered for I think it was 8 years before his enlightenment, just really trying to understand what is the suffering thing that we do. Why do we suffer? And where is freedom from suffering? Just really looking at his own experience and at his own mind, just trying to understand. how that worked. And what he saw was that we hang on to our ideas about things in such a way that it causes us to suffer. We hang on to our likes and dislikes. We hang on to what's pleasant, try to get away from what's unpleasant. We hang on to our labels of things, our perceptions. We hang on to the stories that we tell. And so that we cling, we hang on to these things. And then we try to make them work. And so he says that it's the clinging, it's this hanging on that gets us in trouble. So can we cultivate the capacity to simply see what's arising and what's passing away? That's really why we meditate. There's this goofy thing that we do. We sit and we watch our breath. It's silly otherwise. But it's a practice of learning to be present with what's arising and what's passing away. So we're not quite so caught in our ideas about the breath as we are simply being aware of what's going on with the breath. It's a practice. So we suffer because we try to hang on to a moving target. We don't know how to be with now because we don't know how to be with now. We don't know how to be with that moving target. We keep trying to fit now into a picture of how we think it should be, how it used to be, how it's supposed to be, how it might be in the future. And we're anxious because we're trying to get this to work and it doesn't quite work. That anxiety that you feel, that place where you think, there's something a little bit off about you? You know that place? Everybody feels that. Everybody. It's not personal. It really isn't. It's not personal. Oh, I know yours is better than mine, but it actually isn't. So that anxiety is that place where we kind of really bump into right where we're trying to kind of hang on. We're trying to kind of get this moving target to stand still. And we think that if we just try a little bit harder, or if, our mother hadn't done that thing when we were 3, that, this would actually work out better. Whatever. But that kind of low-grade background anxiety is part of the human condition. And so the Buddha is inquiring, how do we navigate this place of suffering? Punaji says, original Buddhism was a practical solution to the basic problem of existence, which is the anxiety that underlies all our daily concerns, troubles, and tribulations. The Buddha says in the Anguttara Nikaya, one of the suttas, that it may be possible for a person, I love this, it may be possible for a person to claim to have been free from physical disease even for 100 years, but it is not possible for a person to claim to have been free from mental disease even for 1 day, except for an arahat, which is someone who's enlightened, So this mental disease, that mental kind of anxiety, he says, we're all mentally ill in that way. That it's part of the human condition, and it's really why we practice. Can we find a way to be with this kind of constantly moving target in a way that brings more ease? So when we are confused, when we see our own mental illness, we kind of, when we're confused, when we're caught, when we have these questions, we're kind of, it's the beginning of the light beginning to dawn, where we begin to see, oh, I haven't got it all figured out. Nobody does. Unless we're enlightened, which most of us aren't, that I haven't got it all figured out. And so the confusion is really a wonderful doorway to investigation. It doesn't mean that we go straight from confusion to liberation, or at least not full liberation. but to begin to kind of soften around confusion and soften around these places where we suffer is really the invitation of our practice. When we're confused, when we see our own mental illness, we begin to realize that the concepts with which we engage the world are always partial, always incomplete, and always changing. If I ask you, how do you feel? This is John Welwood. He says, if I ask you, how do you feel? What is going on for you right now? And you look inside yourself, the most honest answer would probably be, I don't know. If you know right away what's going on inside of you, that's probably just a thought, your mind hopping onto a familiar island in the larger stream of the unknown. Let that go and come back to the question. What is going on? How is this working? You know, if I'm suffering, how is this working? I'll come back to that in just a minute. So the Buddha invites us to be scientists. The Buddha was an amazing scientist. He was a researcher. He invites us to be scientists too. To notice when we're caught, to notice where we're caught, confused, uncertain, and to begin to investigate, to ask questions. To begin to wonder, what is this? What is suffering here? What is causing suffering? I want to talk a little bit about the questions, though, because the form of the questions matters a bit. The Buddha actually, when people would ask him questions, he said that there are some questions that are not worth asking. And the reason they're not worth asking is either it's kind of assuming something that isn't really going to get us anywhere, or it's looking for some kind of ultimate answer that isn't possible. So he divided questions into four kinds when he responded: those having a direct answer, those that needed to have the terms redefined, those deserving a counter question in response, and those that should be put aside. I'm going to talk a little bit about questions that might be put aside, because those are ones that, I don't know about you, but I tend to get caught in. Take the question, why is this happening to me? You know, there are a couple things about that question that really aren't going to get us very far. One is the to me part. You know, when we find ourselves suffering, we can take it very personally. Like there's something, something I've done wrong, or, I'm maybe unworthy somehow, I'm having this difficulty and nobody else seems to be having this difficulty. So I'm kind of special in that way because it's happening to me. You've heard the story of Kisagutami, the woman whose son had died, and she really kind of had that question, It was really important in her family. Her giving birth to a baby boy, for her, had elevated her status with her in-laws. And she had been kind of pushed aside by her in-laws, but then when she gave birth to her son, they kind of came around and really welcomed her into the family. And then when he was around 2 or 3, he died. And so she was completely distraught and desperate to find a solution. And so she would carry this little baby around and claim that he wasn't really dead. And somebody finally sent her to the Buddha, and basically saying, I can't live with this. You have to make this boy come back to life. And he said, I can do that. He said, I can do that. He said, all you need to do is go to the houses in the village and ask for a mustard seed from a house where no one has died. And she said, oh, thank you. Okay, I will do that. And so, of course, she went to one house after another, after another, after another. And she kind of gradually, it was such a beautiful teaching because he started right where she was and then let it unfold for her that my loss isn't personal. There were no houses that hadn't experienced a really painful death. And so she came back to him and she said, I get it. Thank you. And became a disciple. But this, why is this happening to me? The to me part. Because you're human. Because I'm human. And then the why. The theme of the day-long retreat that I offered is karma and wise intention. And sometimes when we think about karma, we can kind of think that there's a sort of cause and effect, It's like, because there are causes and conditions that things, are because I intend something, then this is what happened. When actually, karma itself is an incredible mystery, and no one can understand how it all works. That the causes of the whys for why something happened are infinite. So it's really not wholesome. It's not useful to ask why this is happening. Why did I grow up in the family I did, or why? Why this, why this, why this, why this. It's really not wholesome. When Bhante Gunaratana was asked after the tsunami in Thailand and Indonesia and Sri Lanka, he was asked about karma. He was asked why that happened. And his response was, bad things happen. Bad things happen. Because they were saying, did all these people have, bad karma somehow? And I said, no, bad things happen. And we can't understand. We can't understand. So the question we want to ask is, what is suffering? Am I suffering here? What is its cause? How do we end it? How do we end suffering? Where's the freedom from suffering here, now? It's interesting, I was working on this talk this week and I got not one but 2 different colds. And it was so interesting to watch my mind kind of working with these questions. It was sort of like, okay, fine, but could we get rid of the cold, please? To just really see how much I did not want to be present. And to begin to inquire, what am I clinging to? What am I holding on to that's really kind of causing that stickiness? Really interesting question. That doesn't have, there isn't like a one-to-one. It isn't like you say, okay, what am I holding on to? And then you go, oh, that. And then, okay, fine. That actually, it's much more like a spiral that just deepens and deepens and deepens. And as we practice, we begin to see more and more clearly these places where, okay, I can soften this just a bit. This clinging, this holding on. So if I'm having a cold, it's not personal, and there's no why. How is it just now? What is here? Where is suffering? What am I holding on to? Is there anything that can be released? My friend Gary Steinberg likes to ask, so how is it working for you? How is that thing that you're doing? How is it working? It's such a great question, When you watch, whoever it is, whoever the politician is on TV, how is that working for you? When you're with your family and that difficult person in your family, how is that working for you? When you're in traffic and, you're at the 250 bypass, and it's one of those days that they have, a backup of, 800 miles, and you have to get somewhere quickly. How is that working for you? So we can kind of keep inquiring, how is this working for me? What am I hanging on to? What am I clinging to? Is there a way I could soften? This is John Tarrant. He says, the with condition is what, in an unexamined way, you believe to be true. Beliefs have consequences. They build their own functional world. When you believe something, you usually want the world to agree with you, to back up your story. Of course, it rarely does, so your story will come with some conflict built into the plot line. In the without condition, you see the world without wanting it to be different from the way it is. The without condition is an act of imagination. You ask yourself, what would the world look like if I loved it as it is, just as it is? The power of imagining life when you are not depending on the stories you usually tell yourself. It can also show you what life is like in the with condition when your maps of the world vary from the actual territory of the world. So what would the world look like if I loved my cold just as it is? It's interesting, isn't it, when you think about that, It might sort of direct me into some kindness and care. Oh, that's what's needed. So at its heart, Buddhism is a science, a very practical science, not a set of beliefs or rules, but how does this consciousness, this mind, this life actually work? If there's suffering, what am I clinging to? What desire for the pleasant? What perceptions? What stories? What emotions? What am I hanging on to that I might release? What is needed? Confusion, I was taught, is the beginning of understanding, the first step of letting go of the neuronal gossip. This is Mingyur Rinpoche, and he talks about the neuronal gossip. He talks about our brains gossiping like old ladies in the park, that our brains just kind of go, oh, I know what that is, and that's, furthermore, And so our brains kind of have this little neuronal gossip that they go. He says, confusion, I was taught, is the beginning of understanding, the first step of letting go of the neuronal gossip that used to keep you chained to very specific ideas about who you are and what you're capable of. The first step on the path to real well-being. He doesn't say that confusion is the final step. He says it's the first step. So confusion invites us to notice our delusions, to notice our reactivity, to notice our suffering, and to bring kindness and curiosity. Right there. Right there. I spent a lot of time with my cold this week, just being curious, what am I clinging to? Really interesting. To release identification, it's not personal. This human body, this human life, it's not personal. To not make myself or anyone else wrong. Releasing judgment and criticism. That place where we start to turn on ourselves when we're suffering. If we don't turn on somebody else, we turn on ourselves. So releasing that. To release efforts to change or fix what has gone before. What has gone before? So we can't fix what has gone before. So just to release those efforts, coming right into now. To release identification of me or mine. Again, it's not personal. To allow the experience of pain, maybe even grief. It doesn't mean it's pleasant. One of the things I noticed with my cold was that I kept trying to make it pleasant somehow. It was really interesting. So to allow the experience of pain and to be kind with it. And to do what needs to be done without all the stickiness of judgment and blame, trusting whatever forces brought you to that question. And sometimes it takes a while to really see what needs to be done. To really be that scientist, to really investigate what's needed here. So in a way, what's needed as we begin to ask the question is often more like what's not needed. What's not needed is identification. What's not needed is judgment. What's not needed are all those stories and theories about who's wrong and what's wrong. But to look and see, so how's that working for you? Where's the suffering? What are you hanging on to when this stream is just trying to move in its own way? What are you hanging on to and not allowing to just move? Up, down, pleasant, unpleasant, gain, loss. Life is like this. I'll read to you Rilke's quote again. You are so young. We are all so young in this way. He says, you are so young, so before all beginning, and I want to beg you as much as I can, to be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms, and like books that are written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given to you, because you would not be able to live them. The point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. Take whatever comes with great trust. Hate nothing. Hate nothing. So, loving the questions themselves. Blessings. Yeah, thank you.